All right, Watchman of Ephraim here. Continuing series, Synagogue of Satan. This is going to continue on the part 10, by the way. Part 2 of part 10. And I may take a long break because I could probably do 100 of these. This is going to continue to examine their false doctrine concerning the two-house theology, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, claiming that they are the Gentiles actually today. They are the Gentiles mentioned in the epistles, especially concerning Paul. Paul was referring always that the Gentiles were the lost sheep. That's all that Christ came for at this time. That is false. It can be destroyed. It's another cherry-picked job. It's another brainwash, indoctrination job. A radical identity movement. I've been accused of that. This is a perversion, once again, of the truth which I witness, which will have to be tested, that the lost sheep of the house of Israel are actually full-blown nations today. And I pretty much showed you their lies in the first video, the last video I did concerning this series within a series. Because the next one I do might be a month from now, because I got some really good stuff concerning the priesthood, what we're going to be doing. Thanks to this Hebrew roots movement and the place where I dwell. So in this segment, we're going to examine their lie concerning Genesis 48:19. That Ephraim was to become the fullness of the nations, or the fullness of the Gentiles. And that all these lost tribes that were dispersed throughout the nations, so they say, in 721 BC, became the fullness of the nations, or the fullness of the Gentiles, and that's where Paul was sent to save them. Bring them back into the fold. Ultimately, these people that they witness, the lost sheep, are carnal, physical people that will be brought back to the land, and that you, the first fruit priests, if we are accounted worthy to attain that age, are going to be ruling over, and I will show you that plainly. That there will be shepherds over these lost sheep. They purposely leave out. Ultimately, they're trying to get you to believe that you have to keep the law of Moses in the letter now. Because the lost sheep, these physical people that are going to be saved after these nations go into captivity, they're going to keep the law of Moses. After the Day of Atonement, it's under the law of Moses for you, because his Shekinah glory is going to return. And there's going to be no tolerance for sin. You and I will be priests. We will be raised incorruptible. We're not going to have to keep these statutes and judgments. We're going to be the administrators of them. And we're going to take a good look at what these statutes and judgments are that they say that they will be keeping, and that you have to keep now and in the next age. We're going to take a closer look exactly what they are. Because you always hear about the Sabbath. The Sabbaths, clean and unclean meat, tassels, but you never, there's others. It'll be obvious to you. Actually, the laws and statutes that we, the priests, are going to administer are all there. They're in there. They're in the Torah. That's our instruction manual, as it was to the Son of God. To rule over a carnal people. I mean, a people that will be in their flesh. Okay. Once again, what has been given to us, the priests, in this age, through grace, not going to be given to the next age. Like people, like priest. What's coming in the next stage is what's called in the Torah the common people. All right, let's get rid of this. So Messiah answered and said, Matthew 15:24, but he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Very true. He went to the Jew first, and when they rejected him, he went to the Gentiles. And these lost sheep were mixed in with the Jews, like Anna being from the tribe of Asher, Paul himself being from the tribe of Benjamin. Remember, his first coming was just a small forerunner of what's coming. In the last days. Oh, we are going to go over the cities of Israel, which they never mention either. Matthew 10, verse 23. We're going to go over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man comes. I'll be sipping coffee, by the way, in between. So he was not sent, but we were going to... I'm also going to show you from the Gospels that Messiah planned on going to the Gentiles and the epistles. That will be in the next video. We're going to examine Genesis 48:19, which they say brought forth Romans 11, verse 25. Let me get a sip of coffee here. Let me exit out of that. Specifically, Genesis 48:19. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants, I get way ahead of myself. His descendants shall become a multitude of nations, or as they translate I forget exactly the. Well, I'll go to the video here. Become the fullness of the nations, or the fullness of the Gentiles. Nations here being goyim. Okay, we'll get their explanation here in a couple of minutes. They claim that Paul was said this concerning Genesis 48:19. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened unto Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. So they claim that Paul is pulling this from Genesis 48:19, that Ephraim and all the lost tribes under Ephraim became the fullness of the nations. In other words, after 721 BC, they were scattered into all the nations. And now in these last days, they're waking up and they're keeping Torah. And God is going to bring them back to the land, circumcise their hearts. That should give it away right now. False doctrine. Your heart should already be circumcised. But when you're in the false paradigm that you have two choices, the letter of the law or Orthodox Christianity, whatever they say has to be true, because obviously Orthodox pagan Christianity is false, and it is. But the problem is it didn't exist in the first century. Their paradigm is false. So they were dispersed in all the nations, and now they're waking up, and now they're keeping Torah. But their witness is very evil concerning Torah, for they are witnessing, for the most part, the destruction of most of humanity in the second resurrection, in the lake of fire. But the Torah witnesses the exact opposite. They are blaspheming the Torah. That's why they are, Revelation 3:9, the synagogue of Satan, dressing like Jews, speaking like Jews, singing like Jews, wearing their tassels, wanting to be physical Hebrews. Orthodox Christianity wants nothing to do with being a physical Hebrew. All right. They are fake Jews. They are from the synagogue. They are the synagogue of Satan. I've been examining their doctrines since the fall of 2019, tragically. Okay, let's go to the 119 ministry video and pick it up. I'm going to pick it up about the 10-minute mark. Forgive me if there's a little bit of lull in between what I want to get to. If I can get to it. Let's just start right about... Okay, we went blank.
What Bible do you read? And how do you know it's the right one? There's only one version of...
Okay.
Go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. Again, we see virtually the same promise continuing down the line of Abraham. And we see here in the text that Jacob started in the land of Canaan. He and all his sons first lived in Canaan. Jacob's name was eventually changed to Israel. Genesis chapter 35, verse 10. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel.
I want you to remember that name Israel specifically went to Manasseh and Ephraim for the last days. Let my name be named on them, as we'll cover in Genesis 48.
The name Israel means he that strives with God. Not striving with God in the sense of opposing God, but rather in the sense of serving and assisting God. It was through Israel's 12 sons that the promise given to him, his father Isaac, and grandfather Abraham began to take root. The 12 sons of Israel are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, Dan, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Joseph, and Benjamin.
What I'm going to show you, though, because although these people like to spit out the word context, okay, if somebody's using context continually, if you're in a debate on Facebook, chances are they're a Hebrew roots, messianic type person. That's where they learn their lingo from. But you know what? They never go to the context to explain their doctrine. Genesis 48 has nothing to do with the law, with other than Ephraim and Manasseh. It has nothing to do with these other tribes. Okay, so it can be blown up right there, and we don't even really have to continue. After the first video, I didn't even have to continue, because they hid from you that Abraham would become the father of many nations, Goyim, which will catch them in a lie concerning the word Goyim in a couple of minutes here.
Because of a famine, Israel moves all his family from the land of Canaan to the land of Goshen, just outside of Egypt. It is here where Israel blesses the sons of Joseph. Israel even declares that Joseph's sons are to be treated as his. Genesis chapter 48, verse 5. And now your 2 sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are.
Okay, remember, this whole chapter 48 only deals with Ephraim and Manasseh. Keep that in mind.
When blessing the 2 boys, as the pattern has shown, his firstborn blessing goes to the second-born Ephraim and not to the firstborn, Manasseh. Genesis chapter 48, verses 17 through 19. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." And so here is where things begin to get interesting. Israel said that Ephraim will become a multitude of nations. The Hebrew for multitude of nation is Melo ha-goyim, meaning the fullness of the nations. From a Greek mindset, nations means Gentiles. The name Gentile simply means of the nations, or not of the one nation, Israel. From God's perspective, you are either of His nation, singular, or you are of the nations, plural.
Okay, well, he lied right there. What he basically said is Israel, what I'm getting, Israel's one nation. And multitude of nations, or nations, plural, goyim, means of the nations, or other nations other than Israel. But earlier in this video, if you saw the first one, he referenced Genesis 35, 10, 11. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, your name shall not be called Jacob anymore, but Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel. Also God said to him, "I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations, Goy and Goyim, shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body." So this guy's trying to say that Ephraim became the fullness of the Gentiles. In other words, his doctrine is that the Israelites, were scattered once again into all the nations, and they became the fullness of the nations, that they multiplied exceedingly, that this was their blessing while they were in these foreign nations. We can catch them in a lie too when they come to talk about the curses, because when he starts talking about the curses, that'll be a video down the road. God says you will become few in number. All right, so there's all kind of contradictions you can bust these people on. But if you're coming out of Orthodox Christianity and the like, keeping the pagan holidays, Christian holidays, which didn't exist in the first century, this is the greatest. This is the whopper that this is the bait that gets you, this is what solidifies their false. This is what will ultimately reel you in. At least this is how I see it. So he's trying to say that we should interpret Genesis 48:19, Ephraim, as the fullness of the Gentiles. Because the word nations there is goyim, and it doesn't apply to Israel. Goyim, he said, applies to of the nations, which gets translated of the nations, meaning Gentiles, which translates into Gentiles in the Greek, ethnos, nations or of the nations. Hope I'm not confusing you. But what he's trying to say that Paul was, when he spoke about the Gentiles, he was actually saying that those were the lost sheep. They were of the nations, or the other nations, or of the nations, assimilated into all these nations around the world. And they're waking up and keeping Torah. Okay, so this is a false translation. And they springboard this from Romans 11:25. Once again here, Romans 11:25. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened unto Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. So what this guy's trying to tell you, and this Hebrew roots Messianics who believe this doctrine, is that Paul, when he said this, was referring back to Genesis 48:19. This is false. Actually, the Greek word here, fullness, and the Greek word from the Septuagint that translated meloha in Genesis 48:19 are different Greek words. So you got to do your homework on this, because these guys are snakes. Like I said, it's the paradigm that makes them believe the things that they believe. These people, most everybody probably has character 1,000 times better than me. I shouldn't be a teacher. I'm doing this for two reasons. But because they're trapped in the false paradigm, they become liars. So first of all, we want to examine, let me go, we're going to, oh boy, hope I didn't do something wrong here. Let's just go to Genesis 48. Okay, let's just, first of all, what he's trying to do, what he's trying to say to you. You know what? Let me just have him finish this out. Let's go to the 1 minute and 13 mark. We'll see where he'll try to connect Genesis 48:19 and Romans 11:25. Come on. That's good enough right there.
Romans chapter 11, verse 25 through 27. Lest you be wise in your own sight, I do not want you to be unaware of this mystery, brothers. A partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion.
He's using the NIV, by the way. And in this way, all Israel will be saved. He's trying to use every advantage he can to try to show you that these verses here, or Romans 11:25, is springboarded or comes out of Genesis 48:19.
Will banish ungodliness from Jacob, and this will be my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Two key phrases must be noted here. First, the fullness of the Gentiles. This is a direct reference of the prophecy spoken over Ephraim in Genesis.
Okay, we're going to destroy this argument by him. He's saying that this is a direct reference to Genesis 48:19. We're going to destroy this in this video. And in the next one, we'll examine Gentiles. The word Gentiles, in the New Testament.
Genesis chapter 48, verse 19. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. The Melo HaGoyim, the multitude of the nations, the fullness of the nations, the fullness of the Gentiles. And second, all Israel will be saved, meaning the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, the Jew and the Gentile all coming together.
All right. Okay. All right. I lost my train of thought. Let me have him finish it out.
Romans chapter 11, verse 26. And in this way all Israel will be saved, as it is written.
All right. Probably the better translation is let me just go to this real quick here. Let me just add verse 26. I tend to freeze up. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come in. And so all Israel will be saved after the blindness is after the blindness is lifted. Okay, I'm going to go back now. He's just trying to use whatever advantage he can, whatever version, translation he can to try to sell you his false doctrine. So what he's trying to tell you is, once again, that all these tribes went under the name of Ephraim and were scattered into all the nations. Once again, so they're going by Ephraim. All the tribes went under Ephraim and are scattered into the nations. Okay, and they became the fullness of the nations. Okay. Let's just go back to Genesis 48:19. I mean, I sound like I'm a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain. I hope I'm explaining this. Okay, let's just go to verse 19. First of all, what he does, he completely blows off the prophecy to Manasseh. Oh, he's saying this prophecy is for the latter days. But you notice there's a prophecy to two nations. I know, my son. He also shall become a people, and he shall be great. He totally blows off this part of the verse. Prophecy. It's about two specific nations, two individual nations apart from one another. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. His seed shall become a multitude of nations. Fullness of the Gentiles here is not the proper translation, like he's trying to brainwash you. Number one, in his argument, he totally ignores Manasseh and his blessing for the latter days. Number two, this chapter has nothing to do concerning blessings in the latter days or multitude of nations, though all the tribes, has nothing to do with any other tribe of Israel other than Manasseh and Ephraim. Let's look at the chapter. Now it came to pass, at which he doesn't, once again, context, throwing it right back at him. Now it came to pass after these things that Joseph was told, indeed your father is sick. And he took with him his two sons Manasseh and Ephraim. And Jacob was told, look, your son Joseph is coming to you. And Israel strengthened himself and sat up on the bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a multitude of people and give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. Okay, that includes all the tribes right there. From verse 1 to verse 5. I'll give you that. Multiplying the descendants, giving them the land. Verse 6, your offspring, whom you beget after them, shall be yours. They will be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. So he's going to make a division here concerning the tribes. Going on, verse 7. But as for me, when I came from Paddan, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. So she had Benjamin, and she died. She only had 2 children that literally came from her loins. So he's adopting these 2 sons of Joseph. So he's dividing the inheritance of these 2 sons of Joseph from all the rest of the tribes. These 2 get the birthright blessings alone, not the other tribes like this guy is trying to tell you in the last days. He's a liar. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons, verse 8, and said, "Who are these?" Verse 9, Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me in this place." And he said, "Please bring them to me, and I will bless them." So it's these 2 children alone. He doesn't even talk about Manasseh. He blows it off. He's trying to get you to focus on Ephraim alone. And he's trying to tie the other tribes in with this birthright blessing. He's a liar. I'm sorry. Hey, I've gotten things wrong in the past. You can call me a liar on them. I don't care. This guy's lying. What he's telling you is not true. The birthright blessing, drill it through your head, is only to Joseph, and Joseph, his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. They are apart from the other tribes. Now, as I've said many times before, Ephraim, Britain, Canada and that, they've reigned, or Britain and the United States, they've reigned since the Spanish Armada over the earth in the latter days. And the other tribes in northwestern Europe, Australia and that, they have shared in that inheritance. These 2 nations inherited the earth in the last days. And the other tribes, they've shared in the inheritance, just like we're going to share in Messiah's inheritance. That's why he is the firstborn. Ephraim is the firstborn, ultimate firstborn. Jeremiah 31:9. He's a shadow of the Messiah, ruling the earth in the latter days. But what I'm trying to drive home here, I want to drive home this point. The birthright blessings has nothing to do with other than Ephraim and Manasseh. This guy's going to try to sell you a doctrine, or they try to sell you that all the tribes became Ephraim, and they did. They were under Ephraim, but to Ephraim and Manasseh alone went the birthright blessings. So this blessing in Genesis 48:19 is specifically to Ephraim alone, apart from the other tribes. And you also have Manasseh. It's to Manasseh and Ephraim. He totally ignores Manasseh. He too shall be a people, and he too shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he. Now I've asked these people, 119 Ministries on Facebook, what about Manasseh? The blessing is to 2 tribes in the latter days, not just one. One was to be a great people, Great Britain, and the other one was to be even greater, a multitude of nations. Before the Civil War, the United States was known as these United States. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. All right, these United States, they were known as, they were commonwealths. They were like countries that banded together for a common purpose. So the blessing is to two specific nations. One would become a multitude. And I'm going to show you. The majority of the translations of Genesis 48:19 reads multitude of nations. And there's a reason why. And I'm going to read an article to you, 34 minutes. Oh boy, this is going to be over an hour. But I want to make sure that I'm explaining this right because I just feel uncomfortable. This could be Greek. I mean, unless you're in this fake movement, what I'm saying could be Greek. They're trying to pawn off the Gentiles when Paul refers to the Gentiles in the epistles as the lost sheep. And I'm not saying there were probably lots of the lost sheep amongst these Gentiles. But the gospel went to the Gentiles, non-Israelites, as I'll show you. This video could take an hour and a half. But these people need to be called out. They cherry pick, number one. They'll tell you the whole story. This whole doctrine is it's bad. It's real bad. It destroys the whole operation of God. As does their whole movement. It destroys humanity, is what it does. So this whole chapter basically deals with the birthright blessing specifically to Ephraim and Manasseh. Verse 9, Joseph said to his father, then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, who are these? Joseph said to his father, they are my sons whom God has given me in this place. And he said, please bring them to me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. Then Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, but in fact, God has also shown me your offspring, specifically the two sons. Verse 12, so Joseph brought them from beside his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And Joseph took both Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. Then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hand knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. Once again, who's the younger brother out of the two? Great Britain became the great nation, and her handful of Commonwealth countries. Let me get another sip of coffee here. Who has the greater power? Had the greater power. We're the only nation that could have conquered the earth after World War II. We inherited the world. We inherited Egypt, as Joseph did. So going back here. And he blessed Joseph and said, now he blessed Joseph. Now, not the other tribes. Get it out of your head. God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has fed me all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. Notice, bless the lads. He never goes into this chapter. This lost sheep video and all these people that proclaim this, you could watch their videos. They never get around this, and they never get around to the next chapter, which gives blessings in the latter days individual to these individual tribes. They're not scattered. Bless the lads. Let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. We get the specific blessings. That's why we're going to get it. We got it all. We trampled on God. Bless the lads. Not bless all the tribes. Bless the two lads. And let them, now listen, and let them, the two lads, grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Not the other tribes. This is apart from the other tribes. This guy's, he's a con artist. But his doctrine, he's probably got better character than me. I didn't want to be a teacher. After 2016, actually. But after I came on the Facebook, well, something happened. This was against my will. Especially from the winter of 2018 on, or the spring. If you've been around, the knowledge of this, especially of the restitution of all things, began to skyrocket. And let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth, the two sons. Apart from, so get that in your mind. Let that sink down into your mind. This has nothing to do with the other tribes. This guy's a con artist. He's conning you. But he's got to believe in this doctrine because the only other alternative to him is Orthodox Christianity. Although we're not under the letter of the law, we are going to be the administrators of the law. We are under the part of the law where we're the priesthood. We've died and been raised with Messiah into the heavenly places. We're under the Torah of the priesthood. Not to add or take away from God's word. We're a finished product. We're not babies anymore having to keep the letter of the law. This repetitive law, that's a governor and a tutor. So this is specifically for the two sons. It has nothing to do with the other tribes. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He shall become a people. There's two tribes. There's two blessings here. He doesn't even mention Manasseh. He shall be great. But truly his younger brother, listen, truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants. Notice that, his descendants. Ephraim's descendants, apart from the other this guy's a lot, apart from the other tribes. Because he's going to try to sell you that all these tribes went under the name of Ephraim and became the multitude of nations, or the fullness of the Gentiles. It says specifically, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and listen, his descendants, his seed, shall become a multitude of nations. His seed alone. These people are liars. You know, I should just make this in an individual video because it's so important. This false doctrine, it's going to get these people killed. And he blessed them that day. By you Israel will bless, saying, may God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh. And thus he set Ephraim before Manasseh. These blessings are apart from the other tribes. Let his seed, okay, has nothing to do with the other tribes. Let that sink down into your head. Britain became the great nation. Ephraim became the multitude of nations, or full of nations. Okay. Let's go to, all right. Okay. You know what, I had an article here. I don't think I even need to read the article. And why don't I just do it? let me just type this in. I had it up here and I okay. I want to read this article. Ephraim, a multitude or fullness of the nations, because I think really this doctrine that they got it off of Orthodox Christianity, trying to explain that Ephraim would become the church or whatever. That's how, replacement theology, more or less. Okay. Many anti-British Israelism, many anti-British Israelism preachers. I don't teach British Israelism here anyways. I don't teach identity movement. These are from Abraham's. These are from the promises given to Abraham. They are unconditional. It doesn't have to do with superiority of race. Read Deuteronomy 7:7. He didn't pick these people because they were the greatest. He picked them because they were the least. We're the least. All these things were given to us because of one man's obedience. Okay. These preachers say that Genesis 48:19, we could just plug in the Hebrew roots movement here. They say that Genesis 48:19 should read that Ephraim, that Genesis 48:19 should read this way. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. They say that the latter end of that verse should read, the fullness of the nations, or the fullness of the Gentiles. Therefore, it cannot mean that Ephraim would become a multitude of nations. Instead, it means that Israel, meaning the Jews, or as the Hebrew roots say, all the tribes of Israel of the northern kingdom, which I just debunked, it specifically goes to the two brothers. I don't really have to go on with this. I'll hang around and do it anyways for an in-depth, because I believe this channel's going to grow one day. It's just, like I said, I'm only doing this for two reasons. They believe that the Jews are all 12 tribes. Okay, or the Hebrew roots believes that Ephraim includes or is the all the lost tribes. Indeed, they go under Ephraim, but the blessing, the birthright, was specifically to these two tribes, and would be replaced by Gentiles, and they become believers and faithful to Jesus Christ. A multitude of people would become spiritual Israel. They attribute this interpretation to Romans chapter 11, where Paul says, "For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Therefore Ephraim will not become a multitude of nations, but that Ephraim, Israel, Jacob gave the name Israel, Genesis 48:16, shall become the fullness of the Gentiles, that the Gentile races will convert to Christianity, and that they are the Israel of God." Is this true? Is this speaking of a spiritual Israel? So I'm using this along in parallel with the false doctrine of the two-house theology, the fullness of the Gentiles, the lost sheep doctrine, that these people are scattered in all the nations and they're waking up and keeping Torah, and they're the fullness of the Gentiles. And I just showed you. I don't even really have to go on, because Genesis 48:19 has nothing to do with the other lost tribes of Israel other than Ephraim and Manasseh. His seed, his descendants alone, shall become a multitude of nations. It's dead right there. All one has to do is read the passage as it is laid out for us. His seed, meaning descendants, Zerah, Okay. Shall become. There is nothing here indicating a spiritual Israel. Jacob was speaking to only two of the tribes of Israel. To only two of the tribes of Israel. So this guy got it right. It's talking about physical descendants here, not spiritual. His seed, his Zerah. This prophecy was specific to them and their seed. It's specific to the two tribes. It's good. It's good so far. So this totally debunks that the other tribes would be included under Ephraim, scattered in all the nations, and they're waking up and keeping Torah. It is speaking of their seed growing into a multitude in the midst of the earth, their seed alone. It is speaking about race, not grace. But they received all this stuff through grace, this race. Many say that the multitude of nations in this passage should read, and his seed will become the fullness of the nations. However, and that's in the Darby Tree of Life and Young's translation. However, the majority of translations have a multitude, many, family, or group of nations. Okay, so if you go to Bible Hub or you go to Bible Gateway and you pull up Genesis 48:19, look at all the translations. Most all will read multitude of nations, and there's a reason why. Okay. The Hebrew word for multitude in this passage is melo, Strong's 4393. It means fullness, literally or figuratively. All along, all that is, in, full, fullness, full, and here's multitude, emphasis added. This fullness that is in this passage does not mean, however, a completeness, as Paul says. This fullness means a large number of nations would come out of Ephraim, so a large number. Another passage in the Old Testament uses this very word, melo, and it's in Isaiah. For thus says Yahweh, has spoken unto me, like as the lion and the young lion roaring on his prey, when a multitude, melo, of shepherds is called forth against him. He will not be afraid of their voice, nor abase himself for the noise of them. So shall Yahweh of hosts come down to fight for Mount Zion, and for the hill thereof. Isaiah 30:1-4. It speaks of a multitude of shepherds. Notice it speaks of their voice and the noise of them. So this word means a large amount, or a multitude of shepherds. It would not make sense if this passage was translated a fullness of shepherds. So in other words, multitude is a proper translation of melo. This word in Genesis 48:19 in the Septuagint Greek, which was between 300 and 275 BC translated, and were on the scrolls in the days of Messiah, because Greek was the language of the Roman Empire. And most of the Hebrew, I do believe, in those days spoke Greek. They knew it. Latin was just beginning to come into Latin was just beginning to be spoken of in the Roman Empire in the days of Jesus. It would replace Greek. So the Septuagint Greek version of the Old Testament is plethros. In other words, for melo, when the Septuagint was translated into Greek, they translated the word melo, Genesis 48:19, to plethos. Let me just see if I got this I probably mispronounced that. Uh-oh. Bad news here. Okay. My computer is slowing down. It's right here. It might take a couple of seconds. Okay. Plethros, more proper translation. Sorry about that. I'm not a Greek scholar, and I just have no interest in learning to speak Greek or learning the Greek language. Maybe someday I will. Okay, so this word here means a great number, a multitude, crowd, great number, assemblage. So it means a multitude. A great number. Okay, let me go back to the article. This is what translates mellow, the Hebrew to the Greek in the Septuagint. Okay, this guy, I'm never going to tell you that. Okay. This is the Greek equivalent to the Hebrew word meaning a fullness. That is, a large number, throng, populace, bundle, company, multitude. Strong's 41:28. I just showed you. The meaning of this fullness is completely different to the meaning in Paul's passage, which they're trying to say Paul pulled from Romans 11:25 from Genesis 48:19. The two Greek words are different. Okay? Completely different to the meaning in Paul's passage. Even today, one of the definitions of fullness means having a great deal or many, a book full of errors, providing an abundance, fullness, freedictionary.com. Ephraim's seed was to become many, full of nations. The Apostle Paul, however, says, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Romans 11:25. This word is a different Greek word. The word is pleruma, meaning repletion or completion. That is what fills as content, supplement, copiousness, multitude, or objectively what is filled as container, performance, period, which is put in to fill up. Peace, in other words, until the completion of the Gentiles has come in. Until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. The full amount that are going to be called, chosen for the priesthood. It's different than the Greek word that was translated from the Hebrew in Genesis 48:19, which is put in to fill up, peace that filled up, fulfilling full fullness. When a complete number of Gentiles be converted, then will the blindness from Israel, Judah be lifted, and all Israel shall be saved. That's how you have to interpret it. And I'm going to we're going to read the chapter in Romans 11. We're going to see he's even pulling from the 10 northern tribes concerning the blindness of Israel, not the Jews in his day, which this guy will never tell you. Okay? Genesis 35:48. Now, when one studies the context of Genesis 48, it is exactly the same as the birthright promise that God told Jacob he would become, as it says, and God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come from thy loins. Genesis 35:11. Notice the parallels between Genesis 48 and 35. Jacob said, and let my name be named on them. God gave the name Israel to Jacob, and Jacob gave it to Ephraim and Manasseh, specifically. Genesis 35:10. And let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Verse 16, Genesis 48. God said to Jacob, be fruitful and multiply. Genesis 35:11. He, Manasseh, also shall become a people. Okay, this guy totally blows off the blessing to Manasseh. Doesn't even expound, doesn't even want you to know about it. He's purposely putting it on, sweeping it under the rug. Genesis 48:19 is about two blessings, not one. in the latter days. Two individual peoples that would become a multitude in the midst of the earth in the latter days. This guy only focuses on Manasseh. Again, I challenged 119 Ministries. No answer. He, Manasseh, also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. So where is he at? Where's this great people and a greater people in the last days? He's just only showing you one, and he's trying to stuff all the other tribes, including Manasseh, under him, scattered amongst the nations in the latter days. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed alone, shall become a multitude of nations. This guy never expounds on that. God told Jacob that out of him, meaning out of his descendants, shall be a nation and a company of nations. Well, I kind of differ on that a little bit. I believe Judah is the nation, but we'll let it slide. Manasseh was to become a people. Nation, strong 5971. Okay. Ephraim's seed alone, listen to Ephraim's seed alone, apart from Manasseh, apart from the other tribes, was to become a multitude of nations, or full of nations, or a fullness of nations. All right, whatever. The context is clear, which this guy never expounds on. Once again, they fail in the context test. Although they'll throw it at you and anybody else, they love that word context. They're total failures when it comes to showing you what's before the verse and after the verse. They love to cherry pick and just show you verses. Like 1 John 5:3. We love God and keep his commandments. But if you look at the context, he's talking about two specific commands. Believing in the Lord Yeshua and loving one another. We're in the priesthood age. We don't have to keep all these letter and the law things. But we should know what they are and what's in them, which you get on this little channel. The context is clear. Multitude or company is meant, and not completeness or fullness in the sense to fill up. But a fullness is the sense of a large number of nations to come out of Ephraim's seed. Okay, now, does Goy or Goyim always mean non-Israelite people? Now, this guy tried to pawn off, you're either of the nation, remember, Israel, or of the nations, the Gentiles. Goyim. Okay, so we're going to look at these verses specifically that relate to Israelite nations that translates Goyim or Goy. This doctrine is a master doctrine of indoctrination and brainwashing. It doesn't exist. There are a people that are coming on the scene in the last days. Revelation 3:9. They say they are Jews and are not, but are liars. Do I really need to go on with this video? It's over an hour. Genesis 2:12. I will make of thee a great nation, Goy. Genesis 17:4-5, which this guy totally left out. A father of many nations I have made thee, Goyim. Lord, will you slay a righteous nation? That's Abimelech. Goy. Gentile. Two nations are in thy womb, Goyim. One is Israel, the other is Esau. A nation and a company of nations, Goyim. Israel alone, the tribes. Thy seed shall become a multitude of nations, Goyim. Doesn't always mean Gentile, like he's trying to con you in, converting over to the New Testament and the epistles. Sinful nation, Goy, a people laden with iniquity. That's in Isaiah, right? 1:4. Isaiah 10:6. Send him against a hypocritical nation, the Assyrians, against Judah specifically. Goy. Jeremiah 31:36 shall cease from being a nation before me. I think that's talking about all the house of Israel and Judah. Goy. Luke 7:5. He loveth our nation, ethnos, and has built us a synagogue. John 11:48. The Romans will come and take our place and our nation, ethnos, translated Gentiles in the epistles. John 11:50. That one man should die for the people, and not that the whole nation, ethnos, should perish. We're talking about Israel here, the Jews. Gentiles. Goy. Worthy deeds are done unto this nation by the providence. Acts 24:2. Okay. Acts 24:17. I came to bring alms to my nation. Okay. Ethnos. So what I'm trying to show you is these words can attribute to the words goy and goyim can attribute or are attributed to Israelite nations. Okay. Let's read a few verses where okay, I'm going to stop right there. And let me see if I need to go on a little bit here. Hold on. Okay. I'm going to stop right there. Cut this down a little bit less. But I'm showing you, actually, these can be interchangeable. Okay. They can actually attribute to both. But I'm trying to show you here that Genesis 48:19 was not meant specifically to Ephraim concerning what they want to translate fullness of the nations became all the tribes scattered into all the Gentile nations. That blessing specifically alone went to Ephraim, apart from any other tribe. Your seed shall become a multitude of nations. Okay? The word goy and goyim and ethnos can translate both ways. But in the epistles, when the word Gentiles is translated as meaning people apart from all the tribes of Israel, as I will show you. Now I want to go to Romans here. Come on. My computer's freezing up. I hope it doesn't affect this video. My computer's been freezing about this time every morning. I could be in trouble here. I'm in trouble. And I went to the wrong one. Just hang with me here. I may have to end this video. But I was going to read the context of, I wish I could sing to you, but my voice isn't that good. Hold on, I could be in trouble. This video might have to end. I was going to read the context of Romans 11 and show you that Paul was pulling concerning the blindness of the I may yeah. He pulls up actually the house of Israel in the days of Elijah concerning giving the example of the blindness in part to Israel. He's not even talking about the Jews here. So it can't be Romans 11:25 can't be talking about the fullness of Ephraim. Yeah, I clicked it on. Let's see if how long it takes in the morning. Okay, all right. Okay, so Israel's rejection, not total. So who are we talking about when it comes to the blindness of Israel? Because this guy's trying to tell you that the Jews were blinded in part. There's a partial hardening concerning the Jews. And when the Gentiles come in, or Ephraim, all the tribes that are scattered amongst all the nations and became the fullness of the Gentiles, when they come in, then in this manner all Israel will be saved. So the Jew and the Gentile, which is the lost sheep, which is all the tribes. So we've just really debunked that. But what is he talking about when he talks about the blindness of Israel? Notice who he doesn't even pull up the Jews as an example here. I say then, has God cast away his people? Certainly not, for I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. So there were all the 12 tribes were part of them were scattered in amongst the Jews, Judah, and you could read that in one instance in 2 Chronicles 11. God has not cast away his people, whom he foreknew. So you would obviously think that this here would be talking about Ephraim and all the tribes, casting them away, only to bring them back in 11:25, verse 11:25. Or do you not know what the scripture says of Elijah? Oh, Elijah, how he pleads with God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. But what does the divine response say to him? I have reserved for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Even so then, at this present time, there is a remnant according to the election of grace. And if by grace, then it is no longer of works, otherwise grace is no longer grace. But if it is of works, it is no longer grace, otherwise work is no longer work. So who is he talking about here concerning Elijah and the blindness of Israel? Who was Elijah a prophet to? Judah or the northern tribes? He was a prophet to the northern tribes. What then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks, but the elect have obtained it, and the rest were blinded, just as it is written. So what's the context here? Judah, who's going to be reunited with the so-called lost sheep dispersed over all the nations in the latter days. He's talking about the 10. He's clearly identifying who Israel is, who will be united with the so-called Gentiles. That's the 10 northern tribes. What then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks. 10 northern tribes under Elijah. But the elect have obtained it, and the rest were blinded. Just as it is written, God has given them a spirit of stupor, even eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear, to this very day. Okay, so who's this talking about? This is talking about the house of Israel and Judah. I think he's pulling from Isaiah chapter 6. Both houses. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a recompense. Let their eyes be darkened so that they do not see, and bow down their backs always. I forget what psalm that is from. That's both houses in David's day. They both existed. I say then, have they stumbled? The context is both houses of Israel. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Certainly not. But through their fall, who? Who's he talking about? In Elijah's day, the northern 10 tribes. But through their fall, house of both houses he's really talking about here, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to who? The Gentiles. Look at the context above. Context, 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 which you never get from these guys. Now, if their fall, who? In the days of Elijah, what? Except for a remnant. He's talking specifically about the 10 northern tribes, apart from Judah. Then when he brings David in and Isaiah, and he's talking about both houses, because they both existed in their day. These guys are liars. Okay, so now if their fall is riches for the world, and their failure riches for the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? Okay, so you can get the context. For I speak to you, Gentiles, insomuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles. I'm not saying there weren't people. There were probably there were scattered in amongst these Gentiles those of the lost tribes of Israel, making their way to Europe, northwestern Europe, to Britain and the United States. But we see both houses blinded here. So that what? He can go to the Gentiles. This is a methodical plan being worked out. Now, this doctrine here is radical identity movement. I magnify my ministry, if by any means I may provoke to jealousy those who are of my flesh and save some of them. He's from the tribe of Benjamin. For if they're being cast away, again, context, Elijah, 10 northern tribes, David's day, both houses. For if they're being cast away is the reconciling of the world, cosmos, the Gentiles, the other nations. What will their acceptance be but life from the dead? Okay? Do I need to go on here? For I do not desire, brethren, verse 25, let's pick it up again, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion. That blindness in part has happened to Israel. Context, who's he talking about? Both houses. Blindness in part has happened, let's plug it in, to both houses of Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles, or the completion, or the full number, called in this present age of the priesthood, has come in. Or the other nations besides the two houses. And so all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from who? Jacob. Okay, so who? Boy, I hope this video goes through, man. Who was given the name Jacob? Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay? Remember that. And he will turn away what? Ungodliness from who? Jacob. For this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Okay, so we're specifically here talking about Ephraim and Manasseh, apart from the fullness of the Gentiles, completion of the Gentiles. I got to end it here. I don't even know if this thing completely went through. That'd be a travesty. I don't want to do this video again. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening.